Patton West is not and never was a guru. The guru persona is a disguise, a very clever one, because by adopting that persona disguise, she has all the wealthy people coming towards her to buy enlightenment. Of course, she can't sell enlightenment. Nobody can. If anyone becomes enlightened ever, it is because of their own work on themselves going within. But Patton West is a criminal. She's always been a criminal. Witness the statements from Jeremy Samuelson back in the 70s, where he was defrauded out of $10,000 by Patton West. Witness the statement from Satya, who was a fellow classmate at the Robert Jaffe School for Energy Mastery. So Patton West, a pot grower, a drug dealer, an ex-bankrupt, had already started a criminal career long before she decided to become a minor deity. Patton West only decided to become a minor deity after leaving the Robert Jaffe School for Energy Mastery, which itself is basically a cult school. It shows people how to form cults around personalities. And that's exactly what Patton West did after finishing that course. She already had the criminal tendencies, and they were well developed, defrauding people one at a time, drugs, selling them, growing them. So the criminal tendencies were well developed. Now she had a powerful weapon that she could use to leverage those criminal abilities. And so she created a cult around herself, projected herself publicly as a minor deity, and filled up websites with lies and bullshit about being able to sell enlightenment for large fees, and then waited as the sheeple, the wealthy sheeple, turned up, only to be harvested after they were brainwashed and conditioned by Patton West. What differentiates Patton West from other organized crime bosses, mafia bosses, is that the weapon she uses to intimidate, to rob, defraud, extort, injure, coerce, murder, the weapon she uses is a hidden weapon, an occult weapon. Occult means hidden. So because that weapon is not on view, it's not a knife, it's not a gun, it's not poison, it's not a club, she has plausible deniability in terms of the crimes she's committed against scores or hundreds of victims over the last 3 decades. And when the community in which this parasite has embedded herself within twigs, gets wise to the fact that this isn't a guru, it's basically a criminal. Her many visits to court as the defendant in fraud-related lawsuits will give that away, as do the number of newspaper articles by local media who receive complaints from people. So when that happens, she simply up sticks and moves to another area. So after getting chased out of New Mexico in 1995 at the point of a gun by one victim, she moved to Montana, did the same there. And when my websites and her constant appearances in court and all the newspaper articles made it clear she was a criminal, they up sticks and moved to Arizona. And so it goes on, has gone on for 3 decades so far. So let's get into some of the crimes. There's not much information about her time in New Mexico, except this document. It's called Pat's Records. The document on the screen is page 1 of the documents referred to as Pat's Records. This is a letter written by Rebecca West, no relation to Devil West, to the police about basically the crimes going on in and around Patton West's compound. In the first paragraph, you'll see that Rebecca refers to the latest assault, which occurred on the 12th of October 2006. In the third paragraph, the highlighted sentence, these files include statements by persons who previously worked for Devra West, citing dozens of abuses and dating back to 1995 in New Mexico. Most are already court documents on record in Ravalli County, MT. In the penultimate paragraph, Rebecca talks about the photograph she saw of Pat Cole's injuries, sustained from only 2 beatings. I understand from witnesses that Patton West repeatedly hit Cole over the head with the heel of her shoe until blood ran down the victim's face onto her blouse. Anybody wanting enlightenment from this idiot? Page 2 starts off by referring to assault accusations written by former students and employees, and it is stated more than once that there are some 40 accounts which clearly represent the pattern at which she operates. Her verbal and physical abuse and many labour relation issues extend over many years at Nakashila Retreat Centre. And there's the 2 images below that last paragraph that spell out exactly what Patton West's modus operandi is. Promise enlightenment for a fee, line the sheeple up, and one by one, shear them, harvest them. And those that go public or oppose are targeted for, intimidation for sure. Some are injured and some are murdered. That's a fact. So after being chased out of New Mexico at the point of a gun by one victim who realized the police, the courts were totally inept, impotent to do anything about a criminal like Patton West, she moved up into Montana. What I'm going to show you now is a brief overview of some of the crimes that occurred during her stay in Montana. Now, bearing in mind that these are the crimes we know about. They are crimes against students, against myself, a business consultant, against employees. But she also tries to defraud contractors, like top-to-bottom construction, issues bouncy checks for real estate she can't afford. But again, I want to stress that 95% of her victims walk away empty-handed. So what you're about to see on the screen now is the tip of the iceberg. So we're just going to have a cursory view of a list, and then I will put into the movie the legal documents backing up that cursory list. On the screen now are 3 crimes Patton West committed since arriving in Arizona. Again, this is the tip of the iceberg, but let's quickly run down through the 3 of them. Under investigation for defrauding the US government out of $500,000 in SBA loans applied for on behalf of non-existent employees. So this was COVID disaster loan she applied for, allegedly, for non-existent employees. I'm not sure whether the amount is $500K or $150K. I've received this information from other people, and there are 2 different amounts. The point is that she defrauded the US government. Next one. After putting a demonic entity in one of her house slaves, Lolita Jordan, Patton West then embezzled Lolita's mother's trust fund. In other words, there was a trust fund to pay for Lolita's mother's care home bills each month. After getting the demonic entity into Lolita, Patton West extracted the coordinates for the bank accounts, etc., and simply, allegedly, moved all the money into her own account, leaving Lolita's mother homeless. The last one is, according to witnesses in Arizona, Patton West has also been charged with stealing artwork from a local artist. Patton West has a long history of stealing artwork, putting it away in lockups, waiting until the, statute of limitations on theft is passed, and then this artwork suddenly appears and she starts selling it online. A pointing case occurred in 2004. In January 2004, Patton West's charity was struck off for fraud after I wrote to the Secretary of State for Montana and shared some of the things I discovered working at her charity, which was a front for organised crime. Patton West had a number of lawsuits against her at the time. One big one would result in 2008 in a sheriff's sale, forcing her to sell her assets to pay past victims of crime $2 million in court fines and interest. So what Patton West did is what any criminal would do, and that is that she stole the charity's main asset, which was the property at Victor, Montana, and put it in a trust fund for her and her eldest son. The second thing she did was round up all the artwork, that most of which had been gifted to the charity or paid for out of charity funds, money given by the public, students and employees, and she put them all in a lockup in 2004. In 2014, having moved down to Arizona, all of this artwork suddenly appeared. Apparently it was valued for insurance purposes at $4 million in 2002. I know, I was the business manager at the time. I saw the documents. What you need to understand is that Patton West is not a guru. She's a career criminal. She spent the last 3+ decades racketeering in 3 western states, New Mexico, Montana, and more recently, since 2010, Arizona. At the time her charity was struck off for fraud in January 2004, she was already the subject of a number of serious lawsuits. One of them would end up in 2008 resulting in a sheriff's sale being the forced sale of Patton West's assets to pay past victims of crime $2 million in court fines and interest. Being a career criminal and not a guru, Patton West first stole the charity's main asset, we've mentioned this, and put it in a trust fund for her and her eldest son. Well, a judge in 2008 broke the trust open and the property was sold to pay her court fines and interest. But $4 million worth of artwork and valuables, that was the value in 2002 when I was there, got hidden in a lockup and brought out in 2014 and sold on the web. Now, in the image above, you can see Patton West standing next to one of these valuable art pieces, and to the left you can see a statement she made while being deposed by my lawyer in 2009. What she's basically saying is that all this artwork and that got stolen. It was a fanciful idea that she'd given up her worldly possessions. She wasn't interested in possession. Again, this woman, when she's lying, her lips are moving. Clearly, this was an attempt to subvert whatever the court decided. Unfortunately for West, the property got sold, but she still hung on to all the artwork and valuables, which was worth a lot more than the property was, which I think the property was up for sale at $1.25 million at the time. On the screen now are a series of business cards given to victims and witnesses of crimes committed by Patton West since she arrived in Arizona. Long story short, it shows that a leopard cannot change its spots. We have 3 decades of a pattern of behavior from Devra Patton West. Now, I understand that to be eligible to be tried under RICO statutes, the defendant must have committed 2 of the named offences within a 10-year period. I believe Patton West has created 8 or 9 of those offences in the last 10 years, let alone the previous 10 years and the ones before that. So again, this video is part of a resource to give law enforcement, the FBI, and again, as a resource for anyone wishing to mount a class action lawsuit against Miss West and her accomplices. Now, what you see up on the screen now is information about her 4 accomplices. Now, the important thing to understand about these people is that Corinne Coffin has been a student, in quotes, of Patton West for 30 years and has been funding Patton West for 30 years to the tune of, we guess, somewhere between $1 and $2 million. Julio Williams has been a 20-year student who has funded her lawsuits against myself. He pledged $2 million to her so she could basically outspend her victims in court. Then we have Jeffrey Reynolds, short career with Patton West, but very distinguished in that he was part of a $30 million fraud attempt against the US government. And he announced my murder and a campaign of terrorism against me and my family, which has been ongoing for 19 years. And last but by no means least is Jack West. Jack West warned me in 2002 that those who opposed his wife had a habit of dying. I estimate 5 to 7 murders, thousands of acts of terrorism, and 3 decades of racketeering. Where's the police? Where's the FBI? Now let's get into the details. First on the list is an arrest warrant for criminal check fraud. I believe that was for handing over a check for $6.5 million, which bounced. Next on the list is an arrest warrant for felony theft. Apparently, Ms. West didn't want to give her rental car back at the end of the allotted rental period and kept it. So that's why the arrest warrant was issued against her. Up next on the screen is Patton West's conviction for assaulting Dr. Cole, MD. Patton West's conviction was announced in the newspapers, and up on the screen at the moment you can see an article that was posted in one of the local papers affirming that Patton West was convicted for assaulting Dr. Cole. Coming next is a scanned copy of the government papers, the records of Patton West's conviction. It's not a good copy, but you can make out that it's the state versus Devra West, and you can see the conviction and so on and so forth. Next coming up is a copy of a statement posted by Patton West on her website shortly after the newspapers picked up her conviction. Basically, as she did with myself, John Watson, she basically denied that this happened. Her first statement is court rules to dismiss bogus assault case. That's a total lie. Patton West was convicted. All allegations have been expunged from the court records. That's a lie. Yes, she had a misdemeanor assault charge and she was convicted for misdemeanor assault. Everybody knows that after 6 months, a misdemeanor assault records are disposed of. So what she's saying is that she was never convicted. It was a big mistake and the court's getting rid of its records. Lies. Truth. Here we go again. The MO of the psychopath, narcissist, is to project her crimes onto her victims, as she did with me, as she's done with countless other victims. The statement goes, Cole's misguided attempts to entrap Dr. West was a ploy motivated by Cole's need to cover up her own in-depth financial fraud, as well as to hide her medical malpractice issues. Again, I'm sure there are no medical malpractice issues against Cole. It is just Patton West throwing shit onto everybody, hoping it will stick. A more polite way of saying that is she's trying to get the public to believe her lies instead of the truth. It gets worse where Patton West is concerned, because the next article up on the screen is a statement made by a fellow employee of Dr. Cole's, and that was Carlotta Finch, who overheard Patton West talking about murdering Cole. You know, the statement she made that as an enlightened being, she'd be just as comfortable in a 6x6 jail cell as she would in a 6 million mansion. Lies. Why all the money going to a luxurious lifestyle then? But it gets even worse, because the idiot, after there was such an uproar, the police came, she was charged, everyone in the occult was upset at the violence. So Patton West does what Patton West does. She goes to the masters, the fake beings that live inside her head. She talks to them. And having talked to them about the altercation with Dr. Cole, she says, the master says that the beatings on Cole were long, long overdue due to her time in the World War II death camps when she was allegedly a Nazi. This woman is completely insane. At some point during my lawsuit between 2003 and 2008, when I got judgment, I did quite a bit of research and discovered that Patton West's criminality was quite prolific in the Bitterroot Valley and surrounds. So I decided to counter her lies and propaganda by putting up a website of my own. Now, what do you think Patton West's response was to me telling the truth to the public?
Because I feel stabbed in the back by you, John. I feel literally stabbed in the heart, stabbed in the back. I feel fucked up the ass. I feel so fucked over by you.
Listen,
I'm not going to take this laying down. If you want to sue, let's go so fucking down and dirty. Huge expenses, John. And it isn't going to come out of my pocket. It will come out of yours.
And as mentioned earlier, the money didn't come out of her pocket. It came out of Julio Williams's pocket. Now, ask yourself this question. Julio Williams is a total stranger to me, and yet suddenly he's being put between me and Patton West as one of her foot soldiers to threaten me to drop my lawsuit against Patton West. And he says that he's pledged $2 million to defend her in court. Now, why would Williams do that? Why would he risk going to jail to get involved with a dispute between me and Patton West? The answer is he's a long-term member of Patton West's cult, and therefore a criminal on a lower level than Patton West, but still a criminal, and they want the truth shut down. And here's an image of Williams on bended knee before the master liar, Patton West. So a 20-year senior member of a cult, it all makes sense when you think of it as a criminal gang. There's quite a lot to unpack in Patton West's brief rant, but the key point is that if I don't drop my lawsuit against her, she will get so fucking down and dirty, huge expenses coming out of my pocket, not hers. And that's exactly what happened. This is what criminals do. If they can't murder or intimidate you, they buy the law they want, and that is exactly what happened. However, what I wanted to point out was that up until 2021, Williams and Coffin were both officers, directors of Patton West's front company, the company she uses for crime, to launder money, etc., etc. Corinne Coffin was the treasurer, and quite rightly so, as she may have put $2 million into funding Patton West crimes over the last 30 years. Comes second, Julio Williams as president. These people are jointly and severally liable for Patton West crimes. That especially includes racketeering, an estimated 5 to 7 murders, and thousands of acts of terrorism against scores or maybe hundreds of victims. I've been a target for 19 years. I cannot tell you how many thousands of attacks I've been subject to. It's daily, and when I say daily, it's 24/7. Of course, there are no statute of limitations where terrorism is concerned. Patton West is not and never was a guru. Now, whether you want to label her a serial killing murderer, a terrorist, or a racketeer, it doesn't matter. She's been doing all three for the past 3 decades or so. In my own case, when I went public about her crime spree in the Bitterroot, I was threatened with murder. That murder was announced by senior cult member Jeff Reynolds. About a week later, there was a failed attempt on my life. Reynolds also announced a campaign of terrorism against me, my wife, and children. That is ongoing. And on 26th of December 2025, that had been going for 19 years. Now, I can name probably 20 or 30 other victims of terrorism at the hands of Patton West. There are 3 of them who have talked about it to me in correspondence, in writing. That's what I wanted to say. So I'm anxious to get into a criminal court to compare my experiences with countless others that have been targeted in this way. And I'll just close out this part of the video by saying that Patton West's accomplices, Coffin, a 30-year server, Williams, a 20-year server, Reynolds, 8 years, Jack West, 40 years, they all knew what she's doing. They all know what she's doing now. Next on the list is the conviction for defrauding John Watson, i.e. defrauding me. Since this has been covered elsewhere, I'm just going to fly through some images and some comments from Patton West and then move on. On the screen now are legal documents confirming my win in court against Patton West for fraud. What you're looking at briefly here, and you have to pause the screen if you want to read the documents, is the front page and the back 2 pages of the judgment. Coming up now is information about the award I was granted, which from memory was $743,000 or something like that. What's coming up next is an article in the Valley Republic newspaper confirming my winning court against Patton West for fraud. Immediately after this appeared, as mentioned before, Patton West posts a statement online, just as she did with Cole, saying she wasn't guilty, it was all a mistake. I'm now going to briefly use 2 or 3 images to explain Patton West's business model, her criminal racketeering business model. On the screen now, you can see a pyramid. At the bottom are the members of the cult, the serfs, the sheeple, the herd, which at some point will be culled, harvested, whatever. Money passes up from them into the various containers she uses for organized crime, money laundering, etc. But it all moves up to Patton West herself personally. None of it goes to the good causes she espouses. From a criminal's point of view, it's the perfect setup. Patton West has 2 things going for her which most criminal gangs don't have. One is a hidden weapon that she can use to coerce, injure, manipulate, murder her victims, those who go public. The other is by organizing a cult around herself. Those members who join her cult, either as students or as employees, have effectively put themselves in prison. In other words, Patton West's cult is like another country. The local laws, the state laws, the federal laws don't apply to her at all. And for the past 30 years, that has been the case. Crime after crime, no criminal investigations. No investigations because the victims and the witnesses in the cult are too afraid to report it to the police or to go public. Those who do, like myself, are slated for a campaign of defamation. If that doesn't work, then a campaign of intimidation, occult under the radar violence, terrorism, that's what I'm talking about. And if that doesn't work, murder. There have been 2 attempts on my life, probably 3. And the campaign of intimidation, which started on December 26, 2006, is still ongoing 19 years later. Is it any wonder then that only a few percentage of her victims ever get anywhere in court? So money flows into Patton West's bank account in 2 ways. The first is through organised crime, racketeering. We've had a close look at Dr. Cole and myself. There are 2 examples of the same strategy working. Cole was taken on thinking she was doing something to improve the world. I was taken on for 6 months just as a 6-month consultancy. During that time, she hoped to brainwash and condition me, like Dr. Cole, and extract all of my wealth. Well, that was never going to happen. So there are 2 types of big, juicy victims. Victims like Dr. Cole, who are basically beaten into submission, robbed, defrauded, extorted, are the subject of embezzlement. The other kind of victims are the ones like Corinne Coffin, who are brainwashed into believing that Patton West is doing something good for the planet, even though after 30 years of association with Patton West and after handing over $2 million, There is no evidence any of this money has gone to any of the good causes espoused by Patton West. So Coffin has been on board for 30 years, funding Patton West throughout that time. Dr. Cole has been on board for almost that length of time. We know that she goes back to a time when Patton West was working in New Mexico. So she left there in 1995. So again, we're looking at 30 years for Cole. And then there's Williams, 20 years, a devoted disciple, whatever you want to call, accomplice. Why do they go for decades handing over money and risking jail for themselves when they know that all the money that they have given Patton West has not gone to the good cause that she espoused, but has instead gone to funding Patton West's lifestyle and her criminal activities? Well, there's a simple reason for this, and that is ritual or ceremonial magic. Every time these people turn up for a meeting with Patton West, which used to happen 3 times a year and last 4 or 5 days, daily they would be subject to ritual magic. In other words, they would be bound to Patton West and have no option but to do as they are told. While I was acting as a business consultant in the first 6 months of 2002, I sat in on one of these meetings. At the time, of course, Patton West was working on me to become a member of her cult. I only agreed to attend the meeting so that I could understand more about her business model. All I can tell you is that I was sat there looking around. Williams, the meeting I had attended, Dr. Williams was at the back crying his eyes out. So profound was the message from Patton West to him, and so brainwashed has he become that he's not only pledged $2 million to fund her lawsuits against her victims, but actually wrote to me and threatened me in an attempt to get me to drop my lawsuit against her for fraud. The point being that whether these people realized it or not, they were being subject to ritual and ceremonial magic. They were being bound to her will. Whether they realize that they're being manipulated and brainwashed and conditioned or not. Words are spells. Take this letter that Patton West sent to Coffin in, I think it was 2005, when Coffin's father died. Now, Coffin's father owned a Coca-Cola distribution plant, ran several of them in Brazil. So Patton West was aware that the business was going to be passed down to Coffin. Look at the letter. How many times does Patton West in the letter to Coffin mention the word gold? I've forgotten, it's 13 or 15 times. But what's important is on page 2, next to the red arrow, trust in me. Oh, yeah. Well, maybe Coffin doesn't have any choice because she's brainwashed and conditioned like Cole was, like Williams was, but to do as she's told and keep handing over money, which she's done for 3 decades, in spite of all the crimes committed by Patton West, in spite of all the obvious lies committed by Patton West. Patton West is always on the lookout for new, large, juicy victims. On the screen now is an image of Sue Ellen, that's Linda Gray from Dallas, And following that image will be images of a letter that Patton West wrote to Linda Gray, hoping to suck that person in as a victim. On the screen now is an image of Patton West standing next to a healing bed with Corinne Coffin lying on it. Obviously, this was one of the get-togethers that Patton West has, and all the guests come from around the country and abroad, and one of them was Corinne Coffin, and Patton West was out front with Corinne Coffin, talking about healing or black magic, I don't know what. Anyway, this photograph is not doctored in any way, except for the fact that we have put $100 bills in Patton West's hands, and we show this image as an indication of how easy it is for Patton West to extract wealth from her, well, even the senior members of her cult. What is strange about Corinne Coffin's association with Patton West, who is an occult master, let's admit it, that's what she is. In Brazil recently, an individual, also an occult master, John of God, was arrested and jailed for raping 10 scores of women and allegedly selling their babies to elites to do with whatever they want. So there's this weird Brazil connection. Coffin is funding Patton West. Patton West is America's version of John of God, who's Brazilian. Just one of those strange coincidences. I guess my point is that if Brazilian authorities can arrest and jail John of God for his crimes, why can't the US authorities jail Patton West after 3 decades of racketeering, thousands of acts of terrorism against scores of victims, and 5 to 7 murders? Now let's move on to the next crime she committed in Patton West. I mean, there are probably hundreds of them, but again, this is the tip of the iceberg. I'm talking about the conviction for defrauding top-to-bottom construction. Patton West sits at the head of a crime family. Her ex-husband, Jack West, has been involved for about 40 years. Her son, Chris Hayward, has a criminal record with the FBI for forgery in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Criminal possession of dangerous drugs in Montana, motor vehicle division conviction, and warrantless arrest. Additionally, Patton West has stated that she's handing over the mantle of her criminal racketeering business model to her daughter, Anna West. Now, whilst Anna hasn't been directly involved in any of the crimes, she has benefited from the millions of dollars Patton West has extorted from her victims. Many of them were friends of Anna West's in the cult before they were removed from the cult after being robbed, defrauded, extorted, the subject of embezzlement or violence. The crime Patton West and her son, Chris Hayward, committed against top-to-bottom construction follows a pattern that has been used successfully by Patton West for decades. That is, she employs an outside constructor or business to do something for her for an agreed price. It goes ahead, and at the end, once the commission, the construction, the whatever has been completed, and the vendor expects to be paid, then they come forward with all kinds of reasons as to why they shouldn't pay that amount. The vendor has no choice other than to walk away empty-handed than to go to law. Law takes months, sometimes years. During that time, Patton West targets the victim to injure them, make them ill, and in serious cases like myself, try to murder me, to shut us up or silence us as victims. On this occasion, rare though it is, top to bottom construction got the verdict they wanted. They won the lawsuit. But this fight may have taken years while being targeted day and night in the hope on Patton West's part that she can intimidate her victim into walking away empty-handed, as so many others have. This video is getting quite long. On the screen now are the next 5 serious crimes committed by Patton West in Montana. They'll go into the next video, number 4. However, I am going to slip in another crime committed allegedly by Patton West's son, Chris Hayward. This is Hayward allegedly defrauding an insurance company. Stand by, the next video will be going up shortly.